Warning! The following vlog will probably trigger someone because I'm going to address topics that are controversial in nature and will probably upset someone or get me censored or demonetized or whatever it is. So before you go get any further, I have warned you. This vlog will contain inappropriate language and thoughts that could be considered inappropriate. So here's my cat, so you don't get pissed off. Okay. I have tried to avoid talking about the current state of affairs in the world in this vlog because that's not my place and that's not the point of the videos. I'm here to talk about gaming and have my own little weird, wacky, sarcastic, negative, grumpy GM, angry man shaking his head going, "That's not the way we did it in my day." And that is the whole point. Comedy, informing, perspective, and educating on gaming. And just gaming. And gaming on its own is a thing. It's art. And it's not my place to judge art or say anything about this art is right or wrong, because art is never wrong. Art is beauty in all its shapes and form, even if the art can be perceived as, oh, well, that's, offensive because it's got a naked man's penis, or it's a statue of a Confederate general, or it's a painting of a naked woman, or it's Laurence Olivier wearing blackface doing Othello. Art embraces all gambits of society, and art makes mistakes. But the second we start saying, oh, that's art is wrong, because now we're holding it up to the standards of today, standards that are being exploded into all sorts of ways because of the events that are happening in the world, and we're taking the events that are happening in the world and looking at art and looking at creation and looking at products and looking at gaming and saying, well, let's hold this up to this new standard that, everything is racist, everything is sexist, everything that happened before this week is bad. So we need to look at art and start picking away at art. And it'll be okay if we start picking away at art, because no one's going to notice and people are going to agree with us. Oh yes, you're absolutely right. Gone with the Wind, a film made 81 years ago, a film that is considered one of the greatest films ever made. The burning of Atlantis scene alone is considered one of the greatest scenes in film history and is constantly reused. A film made 81 years ago about the Civil War, a time in the history of America where hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on both sides fought because they believed their idea was the right idea, and it was fighting against something that was absolutely inherent, abhorrent, the evilest, most foul point in American history, slavery, and the refusal to free the slaves. And, there's plenty of other reasons why people fought in the Civil War besides slavery, like land and their rights to, control their land. And, for every argument for the Civil War, there's an argument against the Civil War, but that's not the point. My point is not to educate you about the Civil War. So say that a film was made 81 years ago about the Civil War. And in that film, 81 years ago, about the Civil War, a historically accurate thing that happened, things are portrayed in that film. So now they want to censor it. They want to say, oh, we can't put it up anymore. We want to censor it. We want to cut it. We want to nitpick it because people might be offended. Faulty Towers with John Cleese, one of the funniest TV shows ever made, being edited, being removed from television because it uses language and ideas that some people might be offended by. And now they're going after Dungeons and Dragons. And if you've recently reading everything that's going on with Dungeons and Dragons and the idea that Middle-earth was racist, and the idea that, oh, well, we need to change the things in Dungeons and Dragons because 40 some odd years ago, a group of old men who were sitting in their basement created this fantasy world, and they used ideas from this fantasy world from mythology and from the writings of Jack Vance and from the writings of J.R.R. Tolkien. And in J.R.R. Tolkien, there is an inherently evil race called Orks. Well, J.R.R. Tolkien, who took the idea of Orks from actual mythology, the very definition of the word is evil spirit, and it's a bastardization of the word Orcus, Orcus being a demon devil from the writings of the Bible and from the writings of even people who existed before, going all the way back to ancient Greece, and the idea that there were inherently evil spirits, the Orcus or the Orc. And Tolkien took these orcs, this idea of an inherently evil spirit, and then said, well, I need a bad guy in my book. And I've just been through World War II. And part of the book I'm writing, The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, is to tell people, well, World War II happened. And this was the result. And part of this book is to give my country a mythology, because it doesn't really have one other than King Arthur. And part of this book is to educate people about the evils of World War II and the evils of the thinking of Nazi Germany as represented by Mordor and as represented by the Orcs. And also I am taking this history and this mythology that existed hundreds of years ago before me, and I'm putting it in my book, The Lord of the Rings. And then Gary Gygax and the other guys were like, we need a bad guy race. Let's use the Orcs for Middle Earth because Orcs are bad. And they put them in the game. Fine. So we're holding people that existed 40 some odd years ago who based their ideas on a guy who was alive like 100 years ago, who based his ideas on mythology and history and stuff, traditions dating back thousands of years to ancient Greece, dating back to the Bible, dating back to the very beginnings of human culture and human art, where human art said, well, there's good guys, so there's gotta be bad guys. There's paradise, so there's gotta be hell. Now, the Orcs in Middle Earth are evil, at least from one point of view. They're evil because these dark forces, Morgoth, the corrupter, the destroyer, captured and tortured elves and exposed them to horrible things to make the first orcs. So orcs are tortured elves, or his interpretation of what the Germans were doing to the Jews. The orcs were torturing the elves. The evil was torturing the elves to make evil. The Germans were torturing and killing Druze and experimenting on Druze to further push their evil agenda. But now we want to hold this current bullshit, social justice, whatever it is, to D&D and say, well, these races have been portrayed as inherently evil. Although through the 40 some odd years of the history of the game, people have played every race as both good and evil. And every DM and every player has said, well, it's either my choice to make goblins and orcs and drow and whatever evil, or it's my choice to make goblins and dwarves and orcs evil or good. I've played in hundreds of games with hundreds of people. Hundreds of times I've encountered lawful good orc paladins. So they're evil in the Monster Manual because they're a monster. But as a player character race intrinsic to the history of your each individual world, it's a fucking game. You cannot hold the fucking game to the same standards as you do real life. It's like saying, well, we have to get rid of Monopoly because Monopoly says it's okay to be a greedy land baron. So they want to change orcs. They want to change the idea that they're inherently racist races in D&D. They want to get rid of the race that is based upon gypsies because it's derogatory to the Romani, even though the Romani existed and gypsies existed and the culture that you are appropriating for your game actually existed. Orcs don't exist, but evil exists. Nazi Germany existed. To censor D&D, to say, well, this never happened, we're erasing this and we're going to replace it with something else, I don't know. To me, that feels wrong. I think, and first and foremost, let's just not forget that Wizards of the Coast is in the business to make money. Peso, just released Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, they got rid of the idea of races and instead made everything an ancestry. Your character starts at the very beginning of character creation as sort of this vaguely humanoid amorphous blob. No gender, no race, no color, no religion. Then you pick and choose the ancestries and the feats and the little things you want to individualize your character and make it your character. And it's very crunchy and it's very point-based and it's a lot like Champions, and it's a mess, but it's got some great ideas because, you know, maybe I want to be half orc, half elf, half carrot, and, you know, but I don't want to have green skin and tusks. So Paizo, Pathfinder, being the trend center they always are, did it first. And now Wizards of the Coast was coming forward and saying, well, we're going to change the way we've been doing races. We're getting rid of the idea of races. So if you get rid of orcs, if you get rid of drow, if you get rid of vampires, if you get rid of gypsies, what do you replace them with? If we get rid of statues of Confederate generals, if we get rid of paintings of naked women, if we get rid of Gone with the Wind, if we get rid of books because those books contain ideas that by today's standards might be considered bad, what do we replace them with? If we erase these ideas, if we erase this history, if we start picking at art, if we start injecting our current thought patterns into art, where does it stop? And what do we replace it with? If we get rid of orcs and the idea that there is an inherent evil in Dungeons and Dragons, fine, okay. What do we replace it with? And where does it stop? What's next? Because if they go after orcs, then they're going to go after elves, and they're going to go after drow, and they're going to go after the Vishanti, and they're going to go after goblins, and then they're going to go after Klingons. What's to stop them from saying, well, you know, Star Trek portrayed Klingons, a black-skinned race, as inherently evil for how many years before Next Generation? And even in Next Generation, there were evil Klingons. So Klingons are an inherently evil race, and they are derogatory to dark-skinned people. So we should get rid of Klingons. Does it stop there? Does it keep going? R2-D2 and C-3PO are derogatory to gay couples. So we should get rid of them because they portray a homosexual couple in possibly what could be perceived as a derogatory lens. And yes, R2-D2 and C-3PO are a homosexual couple. Where does it stop? Do we go and say, well, we cannot show Sir Laurence Olivier's film of Othello, one of the greatest Shakespearean performances ever recorded, because he's wearing blackface, because Othello the Moor was black, and one of the greatest Shakespearean actors in history, Sir Laurence Olivier, did a production of Othello as a Moor, a dark-skinned human. Well, we have to get rid of that because it's derogatory. In fact, the idea that there were ever any species differentiated in humanity, well, we should just get rid of that. The Moors never existed. Chinese never existed. The idea of black, we should just get rid of it. Where does it stop? Where does it stop if we start censoring Dungeons and Dragons, a fucking game? Where does it start? The past matters. Art matters. Our portrayal, our ideas, even when they were aberrant and horrible, matter. Somebody put their heart and soul and creative energy into making that statue of the naked person, into filming Gone with the Wind, into writing that book, into creating that mythology. And now we're saying that because of what's going on in the world, and because all our emotions are heightened, and because the world is not working out the way we thought it would, we need to hold the past accountable and not learn from the mistakes of the past. Because by erasing the past, erasing what we learned from the past, erasing the ideas that, yes, Gone with the Wind has some images in it that some people could be offended by. Splash Mountain is based upon a movie that was based upon a book that is inherently has some ideas in it that some people might be offended by. Star Trek, Star Wars have things in it. Dungeons and Dragons have things in it that happened, that are based upon things that happened 40, 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago. That are based upon things that happened 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago. They're based upon things that happened 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. As long as we have taken crayons and taken chalk and been writing on the walls, art is the first thing that is attacked. Art is the first thing that is said, well, this is wrong. It offends my ideas. Art is never wrong. So for people to start saying, oh, well, orcs are inherently evil, and we've portrayed them as inherently evil in Dungeons and Dragons, so now we have to change that. We have to change the idea that people have used fandom to portray themselves as members of races and genders and sexes that are not themselves. People have been dressing up like Klingons and Orks for as long as Klingons and Orks have existed. People have used Klingons and Orks and Drow and Elves and whatever else as ways to portray themselves as something else, as ways to deal with inner conflict and inner issues and come forward and help themselves through. By identifying as an orc, I have allowed myself to deal with my anger issues and deal with my self-image and come out as a better person. Or by identifying as a female drow, I was able to deal with the fact that I was really transgender and I needed these years of playing as a female drow to help to enable myself to come out and say, I'm gay, I'm transgender, I'm asexual, I identify as a microwave. It's happened. People have done it. People have used the genre, the art, to help themselves be better people. But now we want to say, oh, nope, let's just erase it. It never happened. It was a bad idea. The past was a bad idea. We need to make it go away and replace it with our current beliefs based upon what's going on in the world, which are all exaggerated because what's going on in the world. And yes, what's going on in the world is wrong. The world is not the way we thought it would be. Are we making it better? Are we making it worse? I don't know. I don't want to tell people, oh, well, you can't play an orc now because orcs have now been considered inherently evil and they're getting rid of the orc race and they're replacing it with, I don't know. Everybody's going to be playing tapioca pudding, I guess, in 6th edition. I mean, or toast. How can we be offended by toast? Although I'm sure somebody will be saying, well, you can't roleplay toast because toast is burnt and burnt toast is offended. So I'm sure somebody watching this video is going to be offended. They're going to be offended by the idea that I find censorship in any form wrong. I find the idea of Wizards of the Coast who are blatantly copying what Pathfinder already did, saying, oh, well, we're going to change D&D. We're going to change the idea that there are inherently evil, inherently different races, that there are races. We're going to change the idea because there are no races, because there are no races in the real world. We're all the same. Everybody poops. You poop, I poop, orcs poops, my cats poop, the microwave poops, bugs poop, fish poops, plants poops. Everybody poops. Artists poop. Artists give their heart and soul to creating the art, and during the creation of the art, they poop. So for you to say, well, that art's wrong, let's just erase it, let's just forget it, let's just edit it, let's just censor Gone with the Wind. Where does it stop? Where does it end? Where do we go next once we say, well, that's wrong? What's next? What else is wrong? Oh, that's wrong. Well, that's wrong. Well, that's wrong. Well, that's wrong. And as soon as we erase everything, what replaces it? Fine. Change orcs. Okay, fine. Change them into what? Where does it end? When? Because at no point in history has anybody said, oh, that's wrong. We should get rid of it. Nobody ever said, oh, that race is wrong. We should get rid of them. That art is wrong. We should get rid of it. Those books are wrong. We should get rid of it. So yeah, there we go. And I probably have not articulated what I wanted to say well, but this is just pure emotion. It's raw. And yeah, I'm sorry if I offended anybody, but then no, I'm not. I'm sorry if I offended anybody. If you want to unsubscribe, go ahead. If you want to get me in trouble with YouTube, go ahead. I find the idea of this happening just wrong on some basic level. Censorship is wrong. Now go away. You all piss me off.